What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to this week's episode of Outside the Arena. I'm Griffin Senek, joined alongside my co-host Devin Bernstein, and Week 1 of the NFL officially in the books. We're filming this Monday night, so we will not be able to talk about the Bills-Jets. We predicted that on last week's episode, so if you haven't already, check that out. If you also haven't already, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel if you are new. But yeah, today we're going to be talking kind of breaking down some of the biggest games from Week 1, and then we are going to give an early look into Week 2. It's still a long ways away, so obviously, so the injury status of some players is not clear at all at this point. But alas, we'll do our best to predict these games. But we're just going to jump right into it. We're going to start off with a big game in the NFC North, Packers-Bears. And I'll be honest, the Packers really surprised me in this one. I believe you took them in this one, and you had them as your division winner. And honestly, that pick looks really good right now. Jordan Love balled out, 245 yards passing, 3 touchdowns. Aaron Jones, 2 touchdowns on the day. Justin Fields and the Bears offense just really couldn't get it going. DJ Moore, only 2 catches. Devin, what were your thoughts on this game? Obviously, a huge statement from the Packers early on.
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about here. I think the first thing you probably look at is this Bears offense and how much they struggled. I mean, what are we doing with two targets to DJ Moore? What's the point of trading, back from the first pick? And, they really wanted kind of him or Burns in the trade. And I heard Burns apparently was unavailable. But again, you're really they sacrificed a lot to get DJ Moore. This could have been 2 extra first round picks or whatever. But what's the point of having him if you're not going to target him more than twice in a game? And just seemed like a lot of like uninspired play calling where it was just kind of like pretty boring, simple plays that aren't really going to get open. You're not really trying to run your offense through your best playmakers. They didn't really even do a lot of designed runs for Fields. Which is like at this point clearly his strongest ability. Whether he gets there as a passer, we'll see. But right now, you really want to help himself as a passer by giving him that floor as a running, as a running game as a whole. And then you look at this Packers defense, I've talked about their coaching, being weak, but they looked really well coached. They seemed to outcoach the Bears. Rashawn Gary only played 10 pass rush snaps because he was on a pitch count, but he got 5 pressures. Lucas Van Ness had a sack, I believe, their first round pick. This defense looked pretty good. And then, like you said, Love kind of did everything he needed to do. I mean, it was his first real start as the true starter here. So obviously that's going to come with a few ups and downs, but I think he looked pretty pro ready and, like he's going to at least give them a solid offense every week. And they didn't even have their number 1 receiver in Christian Watson. So I think in theory, this offense is only going to get better, although they won't be able to face the Bears every week. But those are my takeaways from that game.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter who's at quarterback at this point for the Packers. They're just going to beat up on the poor Chicago Bears. I agree with what you said. I mean, this Bears offense, like obviously DJ Moore, tough matchup going against a guy like Jair Alexander, who, some of the biggest trash talk in the game, and he always backs it up. I mean, I think he's kind of underrated at this point. I feel like, no one really considers him in that top cornerback conversation, but he's right up there with the best of them. But yeah, Justin Fields, like kind of just an uninspiring day. I, for one, feel like this could be a huge year for Fields. I'm a big Justin Fields guy, and it was definitely a letdown. I was expecting more. I mean, this Packers defense, it's definitely a good defensive unit, but it's not the best defense. We're going to talk about, a few defenses later in the show that, really had some strong week 1 performances. But, this defense is good. It's probably great, but I don't know if it's like an elite defense. They just got to figure it out. Chase Claypool, a guy who they traded a 2nd round pick, which is basically a first for, he looks like he's just he's a non-factor on the field, which is a disaster. Darnell Mooney had a nice touchdown, but like the running game is, they got 3 guys in there. They're all kind of mediocre. Like it's just this team, I think, is still in a rough spot. There's still obviously a lot of pieces away. And I think that was clear. I think any hope of the Bears kind of making a run, making the playoffs, is kind of put to dust from that. And on the flip side, I think the Green Bay Packers are, if I could change my prediction from last week, I'd probably pick the Packers to win this division. I think it's going to be either them or the Lions. I think those 2 teams are clearly the best. Jordan Love really impressed. I mean, sitting for 3 years, we didn't really know what we were going to see out of him. And he balled out. And there's a reason why, they negotiated, I believe they negotiated like a $20 million salary or something like that for next year. I know they kind of tweaked it because they didn't want to fully accept the fifth year option, something like that. But he looks really good. Like you said, they were without Christian Washington and Aaron Jones, a guy who, I have in the fantasy league that we're in together. I think he could be such an X factor for this team. He's a real talent. Obviously, kind of, got tweaked his hamstring. It seems like he'll be okay, but over 120 yards total, 2 touchdowns. If they put the ball in this guy's hands, I think this team could be going far. And Romeo Dobbs, 2 touchdowns. I think he's got a bright future. So I definitely think this Green Bay team, Jordan Love, huge first game and a statement win for them.
Absolutely.
All right, moving on to the next game of week 1 we're going to talk about involves your Philadelphia Eagles. Came down to the wire there. Almost, Mac Jones almost really led a comeback here. Not the best game out of the Eagles. Obviously, some sloppy, rainy conditions. But they got the win 25-20. They broke out. Obviously, you basically turned the game on. It was 16-0 Philadelphia. And then after that, really, New England's defense stepped up, started playing well. Your thoughts on the Eagles' performance and kind of, your outlook on the season after week 1?
Yeah, I think ultimately the defense performed pretty adequately. They gave up a lot of yards, but a lot of that was just because they were up the whole time, played a lot of snaps. And it's not like this Patriots offense, they seemed like they were just 10 times better without Matt Patricia as their play caller on offense, which isn't surprising to anyone. Even bringing in Bill O'Brien, just a, whatever, he knows what he's doing offensive coordinator, clearly seemed to change a lot for this Patriots offense. But, the defense isn't really going to be the story for the Eagles, and the offense wasn't really the story for the Patriots. It was really on the other side of the ball where the Eagles were able to score early on script, and they had the pick 6. And then other than that, they really could only get into field goal range a couple times and had to rely on Jake Elliott, who kind of bailed them out a few times with some long field goals. But you saw a lot of cover 1 from this Patriots defense, a lot of cover 1 man, which was really happened to, be run against the Eagles a lot against the Colts, where they struggled on offense against a not very talented defense. It happened against a lot of the teams that gave them a tough time, ran a lot of cover 1, and that's what the Patriots did. And they had the guys to run man coverage. You saw Christian Gonzalez, who I talked about in this team's preview. I really was, high on him, and I think he did a great job on AJ Brown. And, the only time the Eagles were able to move the ball after the beginning of the game was just kind of going 5 wide and saying, you're going to have to, leave one of Devontae Smith or AJ Brown in one-on-one. And we kind of were able to take advantage of that a little bit, but that was really it. We couldn't run the ball. Hurts couldn't get going as a runner. Goddard didn't have a single catch. Kind of a disastrous game from this Eagles team, but they found a way to win. And I'm ultimately not concerned because I think this is one of the, 3 best defenses in the league in New England. And I think they kind of started to figure some things out. There's a new offensive and defensive coordinator. So I think there's, some things that will be worked out. And ultimately, I'm not super worried.
Yeah, I don't think there's reason to panic on the Eagles. I mean, at the end of the day, they got the job done. Like you said, I mean, it wasn't like, a Jalen Hurts performance of last year, maybe per se, where it felt like every week he was, balling out, rushing for a few touchdowns. But, he got the job done. And, like you said, I think Dallas Goedert is one of those guys they should get involved more. And it'll be interesting to see how the rush attack kind of progresses once a guy like Rashad Penny comes back. How do they mix him in with Gainwell? DeAndre Swift obviously was in there a little bit. For New England, I actually thought this was a really encouraging game for Mac Jones. I'm not the biggest Mac Jones guy. I haven't been. I kind of just would consider him to be an average quarterback, but I think, Bill O'Brien really let him loose and kind of let him just air it out. I mean, he had 54 pass attempts, ended up throwing for 316 yards, 3 touchdowns, did have the 1 interception early on, which was pretty bad. But, after that play, he really balled out and played really well. And you look at the weapons he has. I mean, he's not throwing to the best guys in the world, but they do have some talent on the offense. Kendrick Bourne had 2 touchdowns. The tight end room is pretty strong with Hunter Henry and Mike Gesicki. So I do think this offense can be better than advertised. And I think Mac Jones, he's a guy that, like you said, they had Matt Patricia there calling the plays. Just by, changing him and getting him out of the building, it might bring Mac Jones to new heights. Do I think Mac Jones is going to become a star quarterback? No, but, can he lead this team to the playoffs? Absolutely. With that defense, I think, and what we saw from Mac Jones yesterday against a really solid Philadelphia defense, I think it was really encouraging. And I think Patriots fans, obviously you never want to lose a game, but I think that's as encouraging as a loss as you could have against, a team that was just in the Super Bowl. So good performance from New England, and, Philadelphia just took care of business kind of like they do. Yeah. All right. Moving on to a heck of a game in LA, shootout between the Dolphins and the Chargers. Tua, man, 466 yards passing. Tyreek Hill, 215 yards receiving with 2 touchdowns. I mean, Tyreek Hill, it seems like at this point, this guy, I feel like even in fantasy football every year, it's like ends up going late first round. And it's like he ends up as like the number 2 or number 1 receiver every year. He kind of gets slept on. Do you think Tyreek Hill is the best receiver in the NFL? And your thoughts just in general on this game?
I'm gonna have to say no. I think it's really 1A, 1B right now, and I would have him as 1B between Hay and Jefferson. I just think Jefferson offers a little bit more as a true receiver, but Tyreek Hill is so damn explosive that if you want to take him and his run after catch and his new thing where he kind of just jumps over people somehow, even 5'10", and the connection he has with Tua, and Waddle has it to an extent, but not to the same level that he's really built this chemistry with Tua. And, ultimately, I said no to your answer, but I'm hyping him up like I said yes. And that's the reason, because
that's just how good Justin Jefferson is.
That's really what it is to me. But Tyreek is just, he's a stud. And then when you look at this game, I was, kind of lower on the Dolphins coming into the season. We talked about that. And I've definitely been lower on Tua for most of his career, but I really can say he kind of shut me up last night with this performance. I mean, he was throwing dimes down the field, and it's not about throwing it 70 yards down the field, and that's never been my concern. It's more that, is he going to be able to throw, with consistency 45, 50 yards downfield, getting it where he needs to. And yesterday he was really able to, with the one exception of that interception to JC Jackson. But, ultimately, other than that, it was a really good game from him. If you look at it for the Chargers, they were mostly running the ball. That was, the main way they moved the ball, which is interesting because we haven't seen that a ton from them in the past. But you saw Eckler have a huge run. He kind of seemed to be running with like a new sense of urgency, which was a little weird for a 30-year-old back. But they were running the ball well. They were moving the ball well on offense. It kind of just was one of those games that came down to who had it last, and the Dolphins just had a bit more in them.
Yeah. I saw it, I forget who posted it, but some NFL guy I follow on Twitter posted something about Tua saying, if he throws for 5,000 yards this year and like 35 touchdowns, do you give him like the Joe Burrow contract? And I think it's a super interesting question, because it's like, if he goes out and does that, like, you kind of have to, but it's like, I think with Tua, we're just accustomed to being like, we just put him to the side, where it's like, no, this guy is not this, elite quarterback, he shouldn't be in that category. But when this guy's been healthy, he's balled out in this offense. And, obviously, like you said, you got to give credit to Tyreek Hill. This guy's a superstar. He's obviously got Waddle there. Like, he has, legit superstar weapons, but he finds a way to get them the ball. Late last year, I feel like, you don't want to make excuses, but the guy was like literally playing concussed. So it's like, you got to give him some slack for the end of the year last year. If he's healthy, I think he's, up there in the conversation to be a top 10 quarterback. This offense is really good. I think they're still missing, that running back, though. Obviously, Raheem Mostert, they don't really run the ball much, but 3.7 yards a carry. He did have a touchdown, but it's like, that's where it's like you start hearing these rumors of JT again picking up. And it's like, if they add Jonathan Taylor to this offense, but Mike McDaniel at the helm, like, oh my God, like this team is going to be unstoppable. And the defense, they've got some guys, Jalen Phillips, the game-winning sack. He's a guy who I think is going to have a really big year on that defense. They've also got, obviously, Christian Wilkins, the guys you've heard of, Bradley Chubb, Xavier Howard, Jalen Ramsey coming back later in the year. So Miami, really impressive. It's a statement win, and for Tua to kind of shut people up like right away is, really encouraging, I think. On the flip side, the Chargers, I don't think they should be discouraged by this game. This just was, I feel like everyone knew this was going to be a classic shootout game. Defensively, they have to be better. But offensively, I mean, kind of what you expect. You got so many weapons, and, it was interesting to see, like you said, the usage of the rush game. And you got to wonder, Kellen Moore coming over and being the offensive coordinator kind of reminds you of that, Zeke Pollard usage a little bit from last year, seeing how much Joshua Kelly was involved. And he had a great game rushing for 90 yards and a touchdown. So it'll be interesting to see, was that kind of a Miami game plan, or is that kind of be how this offense is kind of, centered going forward? So super interesting. Both these teams are going to be in the playoff push to the end, but really impressive game from Tua, obviously, and a big statement in Miami, or in LA, I should say.
For sure.
Another big statement. This last game we're going to talk about for week 1 before moving on to week 2. I mean, I think it's safe to say, I'm going to be 100% honest here, I think the New York Giants season ended last night. I think, I was listening to First Take today. Stephen A called, that, said that Dak beat Saquon Barkley in a bag of chips. And, I can't fully disagree with him. They got some talent, but 40-0, I mean, it's like I don't even know where to start. Obviously, the defense for Dallas, almost historic performance. I think fantasy-wise, it's got to be up there. I mean, they put up 35 fantasy points or something crazy. Obviously, I mean, it's a wild game. What were your thoughts? Obviously, we were texting a little bit during this game. So, I mean, just pure insanity, though. I mean, what a beatdown.
Yeah. So, I mean, the first thing I'll say, just to touch on the Cowboys defense in fantasy, specifically, we were talking about this with my friends. I was like, I wonder what the most points a defense has ever gotten in a fantasy game. And our number was around 30, and they got 35 in my league. So that's pretty ridiculous.
Did you find what was the record number?
We never looked it up, but
I'll look it up right now.
Yeah, look that up, and I'll keep talking here as you get that. But really, this game just kind of ended as soon as that first field goal got blocked and returned for a touchdown. And you had some bad luck for the Giants. Just that's bad luck. Sorry, I saw your face there. What is it?
52.
Really?
I don't even believe that. Oh my God. So it says the Cleveland Browns are credited with the highest number of fantasy points scored by a defense with a whopping, I guess it's 50 points. They had 6 fumble recoveries, 2 safeties, and 3 defensive touchdowns.
That is ridiculous.
6 fumble recoveries. That is insane.
Wow.
Okay.
So it kind of just felt like some bad luck for the Giants. Like, you get the kick blocked, and it's like that, that happened, that counts, but that's not really something that says how bad of a team you are. But things just didn't go well. They couldn't move the ball, and the Cowboys weren't even that impressive on offense, but like you just had the special teams touchdown, the defensive touchdown, and they were able to do enough on offense against this Giants defense, and the Giants didn't score the entire game. They, Daniel Jones, poor guy. I mean,
yeah,
he was under.
No, I mean he's one rich guy, so I can't feel too bad for him.
Yeah, no, you don't. I don't feel bad for him as a person, but I would not want to be Daniel Jones last night. That was not fun. I mean, on every play, you had guys coming from everywhere. It seemed like this defense had been like waiting for this game for 7 months, trying to kill Daniel Jones. And honestly, just props to Dan Quinn. And the last thing I'll say, real breakout star this year, Osa Odigizua on the interior defensive line. I think he had a sack or 2 last night.
Yeah, 2 sacks.
He's just really dominant there. One of those guys as a interior guy is just way too quick. And he's looking like he's ready for a breakout, which is the last thing you want to hear as an NFC East fan.
Yeah, I mean, this Dallas defense is just it's insane the amount of talent they have. Obviously, the big names, the Micah Parsons, but it's like they all perform. Like you look at the stat sheet, Parsons had a sack, DeMarcus Lawrence had a sack, Stephon Gilmore, who they brought in, had a pick, Trayvon Diggs had a forced fumble. So it's like all the superstars are performing. They're all making plays. And then, like you said, the guys like, I'm not even going to try to botch that. You nailed it, so we're going to leave it at that. But the guy, like you mentioned, Dorrance Armstrong put up 2 sacks. Like they've got all these other guys that are, performing. The Mozzie Smith, their first round pick, you played a little bit, but they've got, and I remember they were saying it on the broadcast, like they're just rotating in and out of guys. And it's just like, no matter what happens, they were just getting to the quarterback. So I think this team is going to be, I mean, obviously they were going to be good. And I think after week 1, I'm definitely higher than them than I was. I think they're a lot closer to that Eagles 49ers tier than I thought they were.
Mm.
But I still wouldn't put them in there just because I think offensively, Dak Prescott still has got stuff to prove that he can play in the big game, that he can lead a team in the big game. And, he hasn't done that. So I don't think, you can put them in that tier. Obviously, they've got a great defense. Offensively, Tony Pollard looked good. They didn't really have to do much. Their offense was kind of just like, they had their few drives. But yeah, I mean, on the flip side, the Giants, like you said, like, I came at them a little harsh maybe to start breaking down this game, saying their season's over. But I just don't know. I don't think this team, like, obviously, they're just pieces away. They're just not there for
Yeah.
like a Super Bowl. I don't even know if they'll be able to make the playoffs, to be honest. They just obviously they bring in Darren Waller. He's kind of already banged up. Um, and just you look at the receiver room. The guys that are catching these passes, it's like Isaiah Hodgins. Like he was like a waiver wire pickup last year. He did well, but like he's kind of average. Lawrence Cager, Darius Slayton, Gary Brightwell, Paris Campbell. Like it's just not that good. Like they just, and that's where you feel for Daniel Jones, like you said, like he doesn't really have anyone to throw the ball to. It's just tough. Saquon Barkley really has to take the bulk of the load, and he looked good last night. Um, but it's just tough. This defense, I think it'll be a all right defensive unit. The one thing for Daniel Jones, he got screwed that game by just his offensive line, but that one interception, not the one where Saquon kind of dropped it, but the other one was not a great throw, and he's just got to limit those if this team is going to go far. But not the way the Giants want to start the season. Obviously, they're going to need to bounce back, and yeah, I just don't know. I just don't think the Giants are going to be very good this year. Just yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, for whatever reason, that talent deficit, especially on the line, didn't seem to show up last year, but it really showed up last night.
Yeah.
The second round pick, John Michael Schmitz, really struggled, which I didn't see coming. I thought he was really pro ready. The interior just looked awful, to be honest. Evan Neal kind of got worked, which
he was getting cooked on Twitter.
yeah. And that's the last thing, for more than just the loss and the blowout and all that, your top 5, or I don't remember exactly what pick he was, but
7 or something like
seven,
that. Yeah.
either 7 or 5 in that draft, but a huge investment. And if he just isn't figuring it out, that's not good. That's really not good for this team. They're not one of these teams where they, can just survive that. They kind of, needed everything last year to work out, and everything kind of went their way last year with the exception of Evan Neal. And now it's like this year you kind of needed an Evan Neal breakout. You needed John Michael Schmitz to be a good starter as a rookie. You needed, this receiving core to really be ready. And it just looked so meh at best last night. And yeah, it's just, I'm not going to write them off because I wrote them off last year and they were impressive, but it doesn't look good right now after week 1.
Yeah, I think that Daniel Jones contract obviously going to get discussed a lot. He's got a lot to prove. Obviously, though, you look at the conditions of the game. It was a disaster to play in that weather. It was. I don't know why he was even in the game for as long as he was, but that's another conversation. But yeah, Giants, they're heading to Arizona, so maybe a much more favorable matchup. We'll talk about that in a second. So yeah, moving on to week 2. Like we said, the Jets Bills is tonight. We predicted that last time, but that's a big game. But Vikings Eagles is going to kick us off on Thursday night. It feels like the Eagles kind of own the Vikings. Obviously, the Vikings disappointing week 1 loss to Baker and the Bucks. Man, Baker was pretty fired up. He, that one play where he got the first down, lowered his shoulder. That's such a Baker play. He just kind of goes for it, which you got to love. I have nothing against Baker Mayfield. He's a good guy. But yeah, rough loss. What are your thoughts of Vikings Eagles? You think the Vikings could pull it out?
Yeah, so I'm gonna start with a quick point. I didn't really talk about much in the Eagles game. James Bradbury kind of looked horrible. And whenever we were in man coverage, it just didn't look good. And then he got hurt eventually, and we saw undrafted rookie Josh Jobe on the outside. So whoever is playing on Thursday will be a question mark. And whether, you see Slay kind of shadowing Jefferson, that's a tough matchup in itself. But then you also have Addison now who can really win on the outside and get open going up against an undrafted rookie. So this game really has shootout potential because Jesus Christ, is this Vikings defense bad.
Yeah.
And, we know what the Eagles offense can do. And I just think the Vikings are going to be able to air it out and, move the ball. I think it was a tough loss for the Vikings, but this is really kind of who they are. They're going to play a team close, kind of no matter who they are, because they have a good passing game, but the rest of the team is just whatever. So they kind of just end up being in it no matter what, not blowing a team out, not losing by a ton. So I wasn't really like disappointed or surprised that they lost. I mean, I guess a little bit just because it was to the Bucks. But you're gonna get weeks where Baker is like, oh yeah, I was the first overall pick, and he's confident and he's got a good, receiving group. So they're not gonna be horrible this year. They're, maybe gonna win 6 or 7 games. So that wasn't a shocker to me. I have them probably in a similar category to the Vikings, but I think it's gonna be another good game for the Eagles. Just a competitive start to the season for them, but I do think they'll pull this one out.
Yeah, I think the Eagles will win this one. I just think the Vikings have just lost. They just lost a lot of talent in the offseason. You lose
Yep.
Dalvin Cook, you lose Eric Kendricks, who was kind of the centerpiece of that defense. Dalvin Tomlinson, Zadarius Smith, who was huge for them last year. Like they just lost all these guys, and Pat Pete too in the secondary. He was a big piece. Like you just can't expect to Adam Thielen too. Obviously, replaced with Jordan Addison. I mean, it's like all these names keep popping in my head.
Yeah.
But yeah, they just lost a lot, and that happens. Sometimes you have a core and just cap space. You just can't keep them all. So I think they're just kind of in a rough year where they're dealing with the downfall of that, and just the talent's not there. And I think Philly is, if Bradbury, it seems like he'll be out with the concussion. But I just think they're too talented. I think offensively, they might go out and put 40 points on the board. I think Hurts is going to, I think this is a great week for him to kind of rebound and show us, that he's still that guy. Not that anyone really doubts him, but, like we kind of talked about, either an episode or two ago, I feel like people still don't put him on that, tier with a Mahomes or a Burrow. Whereas I feel like if he puts it together another year like he did last year, you got to put him in that level. So I think he's going to have a huge game, and I think the Eagles will win this one. Maybe the score is a little close, but I feel like they'll kind of always be in control, even if the point's going to get, within a score or so.
Agreed.
Moving on, Packers, Falcons, both 1-0. Falcons, obviously, nice win over the Panthers. Bijan Robinson, first career NFL touchdown. Drake London and Kyle Pitts having 3 combined targets, I think it was, is pretty crazy. But yeah, what are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah. I mean, the Falcons kind of love to piss everyone off, especially fantasy managers. But if we can, I guess I'll talk about that in a second. Just talking about how they performed on the field. This is a really, really fun team to watch because they run the ball really well, and they just really innovative in the run game. Arthur Smith has just got a good idea of how to get things open in the run game. And I think Ritter will have better weeks in the passing game than we saw. I think he looked okay. He started out with like a catch to himself and then another negative completion. So like
Getting more catches than Drake London.
Yeah. So a little bit of a weird game, but
yeah.
When you look at this team, they're really talented and they don't like to target them really talented guys. I mean, Bijan, they seem like they really want to use him, but even then they gave Tyler Algier a lot of carries. But I'm not really, horribly mad about how they use Bijan, but where you can really get upset is how are you not targeting Drake London at all? How are you not getting Kyle Pitts the ball more? I mean, these are guys who are both dynamic before and after the catch, especially Pitts. Like no one can guard Kyle Pitts. Like get him the ball. And Drake London really started to look really good last season, especially when Ritter came in. I mean, they started to build a connection and they only passed 18 times. So the yards and the targets are going to look even smaller than they would be. But, you've got to probably pass more like 25 to 30 times a game to really be like a really good offense. And, we didn't see that, but I'm confident they can do that. Like you said, 3 targets between the 2 main guys. If you look in more like a 10 to 15 target range, I think that can, really help this offense be one of the top groups in the league. And then defensively, Jesse Bates looked really, really strong. He had two picks and 10 tackles. So,
yeah. So you're picking the Falcons or the Packers?
Yeah. Yeah,
Falcons.
I'm gonna go with the Falcons.
Okay.
Sorry, we didn't talk much about the
I
Packers
know.
here,
Yeah.
but
Well, we already
I
talked
think
about them.
yeah, these are two of the two teams that my two surprising teams. So I'm at a bit of a crossroads here, but I think I'm gonna go with the Falcons. I think the Packers defense is gonna be a little bit more disappointing this week, and I think that Falcons defense is much better than the Bears defense that the Packers just faced. So I think that, they could have just a slightly tougher week for Love, where it just seemed like everything was easy and open, and he didn't even have to, panic really in his first true start here as the franchise quarterback. So I think you could start to see a little bit of, whether, I'm not really worried about Love, but,
Yeah.
just a tougher environment, tougher situation this week. So I'll pick the Falcons.
Yeah. I'm gonna go with the Packers. I feel like kind of drinking the Packers Kool-Aid now. Like I just really was impressed defensively, and I think offensively, like Jordan Love kind of just showed that poise. And I think you look at a defense that they're going to face this week. It's a lot better than the Panthers defense. The Panthers defense, they have a few guys. Obviously, I think J.C. Horn went down in this game and got hurt. But the Packers are much more well-rounded. If you thought Drake London wasn't going to get targeted last week, with Jair on him, who knows?
Yeah.
He's definitely not seeing the ball this week. But this will be the week where he gets like 20 targets. But yeah, I just think the Packers are the better team. Talk about the Falcons real quick. I think you covered it pretty well. This team, obviously, I mean, you look at Arthur Smith, his history in Tennessee, like he's a guy who wants to run the football, and he has two really good running backs to do that with. So I think this offense is going to be very run heavy. I just think it's a little, as a Drake London fantasy manager, it's frustrating, but just in general, like it just sucks to see him and Kyle Pitts just like kind of wasted. Like Kyle Pitts is now in year 3, and we haven't really seen him get the ball like at all. Like it's pretty weird. There's literally like I think 1 week when he was in London, maybe playing the Jets like in his rookie year, where I remember him like getting like 8-9 targets. And then outside of that, it's like this guy cannot get the ball to save his life. And he's, like you said, so talented, always gets open, no one can cover him. And he's not getting the ball. And it sucks because we're just seeing, I really hope we don't see those two guys just kind of have their careers wasted just because, the offense they're in and no one wants to get them the ball. And it's just weird from a team perspective. It's like, why are you wasting, a fourth and I forget where London was drafted, I think 8th overall pick or something
Yeah.
like that on like these two guys when it's like use them on like the O-line or defense if you're not even gonna, get them involved. It's like you could stick anyone fucking out there. It's like if they're not catching the ball, it doesn't matter at the
Yeah.
end of the day. So they got to find ways. And Arthur Smith has got to find ways to get them the ball. Otherwise, it is just a total failure on his part because you look at the capital they use to get those guys and you just have to get them the ball. And I'm not saying, look, Bijan and Tyler Algier as a duo, 100% they should be running the football and that can be the focus. But you gotta do better. And maybe that's on Gritter. Maybe he's just, not comfortable. I don't really know. But you gotta get your two guys the ball, especially with where they're drafted. I just want to see those guys succeed too. I mean, it's just like it sucks seeing those two guys really not I mean, Drake London didn't have a terrible year last year, but Kyle Pitts, he needs his breakout just for the heck of it. I mean, I feel like everyone's rooting for him. But yeah, I'll go Packers there. Moving on, Colts, Texans, battle of the AFC South. Anthony Richardson, he honestly looked really good last week. Really impressive. CJ Stroud, not bad too, with what CJ Stroud was working with. Only the one fumble. I was impressed. In Houston, I'll start off real quick. I'm going to go with the Colts. I just think, I thought they were really well coached. I think Anthony Richardson had a big game. I think, his rushing ability, something that, we're already seeing, Shane Steichen use from the get-go, which I think is awesome. I think, his ability to be a runner, and he looked like Jalen Hurts at times in that offense. It was awesome. Michael Pittman had a good game, and I think that Colts defense is better than the Texans defense right now. The Texans did play the Ravens closer than I would thought they would. I just think offensively, the Texans right now, they just don't really have many, outside of Damian Pierce, there's not really anyone that catches your attention, which I think is just going to be, the problem. I think the Colts will be able to score a little more easier than the Texans. So I'm going to go with the Colts.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with the Colts too, but just to quickly touch on Stroud, we kind of talked about how this just feels like like a 3 turnover disaster. Everyone's calling Stroud a bust game, and it really wasn't. He looked
Yeah.
he didn't look great, but he looked like he wasn't, too scared of the moment and like wasn't super overwhelmed by a Ravens defense that can be really overwhelming. And I was pretty impressed by what he showed, but this is just like you said, just not a good receiving core. Their line is banged up, and outside of Laramie Tunsil, it's not that good anyway. And this defense is playing hard, and they've got a little bit of talent now, but it's still not that good yet. And I think the Colts are further along. They've got some weapons in the passing game. Richardson looked like really composed, and he actually was really accurate yesterday, which was a great sign if you're a Colts fan or just rooting for Anthony Richardson like I am. And their defense has some playmakers on it. We saw DeForest Buckner on that weird play yesterday.
Yeah.
Kind of got a touchdown after making the strip sack. That was a weird play, but
That was very weird. Yeah.
yeah, the Colts actually kept it close against the Jags at home, which I think I kind of said I could see that happening, but I kind of like to play it down the middle and say anything could happen. So I always but I'm gonna take the Colts here. Yeah, this is gonna be an interesting matchup.
Yeah, definitely. Moving on, Seattle versus at Detroit. Jared Goff, obviously big week 1 win against Kansas City and Patrick Mahomes. Seattle, very disappointing week. Geno Smith only threw for like 100 something yards. Very disappointing for a team with such high expectations. And I'm going to pick the Lions here. I just think this is a hungry, gritty team, and at home, I feel like they're going to be able to take advantage of the Seattle defense, which gave up 30, something points to the Rams, which, I don't think anyone saw that coming. And Matthew Stafford, we'll talk about him in a little bit, but he really proved he's still one of those guys. His talent hasn't gone away. But the Lions, just a good team. I think Jahmyr Gibbs, I hope we'll see a little more of him going forward. He was really explosive in that Thursday night game, and they've got Amon-Ra St. Brown, and this defense, they proved it against the Chiefs. They find ways to get the win, and when the pressure amounts, that they can stop them. So, I just think the Lions and Geno. I'm not worried, but I'm a little worried. I feel like I feel like a regression with him is kind of predictable. And after week 1, I'll be honest, I didn't really watch too closely the Rams Seahawks game. But just with those weapons, looking at the stat sheet, it is a little concerning, especially with, our boy Russ East was in the secondary, so I can understand how it was a rough game for him. He had to avoid, that side of the field at all times. But yeah, I don't know, a little concerning for Geno, but we'll see if he can get it going. But yeah, I'm going to pick the Lions. This does feel like it could be a shootout type game, though, for sure. This could be a 45-42.
Yeah, I'm going to take the Seahawks here, but I was a little bit concerned with how they played just because of how kind of low I was on the Rams. And I mean, name as many of the other 10 starters on the Rams defense as you can. Well, let's play that game. Like, right? We played it last week, and it's still true. Like, that's never good when your offense can't move the ball, and especially not against a Rams defense that doesn't have many guys that people know. And we'll talk more about the Rams in a little bit, but I just think this is going to be a shootout game. I think the Seahawks are going to want to rebound after that. I think they just have 3 really good weapons, and the Lions don't really have any great corners. They have solid starters across the defense now, but no one that you're really worried about, in terms of shutting down a DK or a Lockett or a JSN. And now that they have 3 of those guys, I just think it's going to be a tough game for them, and their defense got carved up by the Rams. So I don't see any way they stop this Lions offense. So I'm going to say this is a shootout, but just because the Lions won and the Seahawks lost and everyone seems to be hyping up the Lions and down on the Seahawks, I'm going to pick the Seahawks to kind of weirdly win this in a shootout.
Yeah, very fair. Moving on to the next game, Chargers at Tennessee. Ryan Tannehill, 3 picks. I mean, it seems like his time has passed, but I'll flip this one right back to you. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it was funny. I was kind of talking to my friends yesterday, and I was like, yeah, I think Tannehill's like a little bit better than Derek Carr, and everyone got really mad at me about that. And as soon as that happened, Tannehill had one of the worst games I've ever seen. So I really was not impressed. Well, not even not impressed. I was really disappointed by how he looked. And I think Willis was actually their backup yesterday.
Yeah.
So I guess maybe they would go to him first and then Levis at some point, because I'm not really confident in Willis at this point, but hopefully maybe one of them can figure it out. But it doesn't look great for that situation. But that being said, I do think this is going to be at least a close game. Just because, the Chargers run defense is really struggling in the past, and you look at what the Titans can do well, and it's run the damn football. So I think this will be a closer matchup than expected, but the Chargers, you don't want to start 0-2 in the AFC. I mean, you don't at all, regardless of any circumstances,
No,
but
definitely.
especially when you're trying to win a Super Bowl and you're the Chargers, you can't start 0-2. And I think they're going to come out and win this game.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with the Chargers here too. I think they're just the more talented team. At the end of the day, Ryan Tannehill, like, he cannot be starting for this team. Like, I know Vrabel likes him, and he's gonna probably get a few more games, but like, especially if they keep losing, like, you have to. And I don't even understand why Malik Willis is. Maybe he really balled out in practice. I don't really know. Um, I don't know. I feel like we saw what Malik Willis kind of was last year, and it's not an NFL quarterback. And I just think they got to give Will Levis a shot and just see what he is. But yeah, I'm gonna go Chargers. Like we talked about them already, but this offense I think is gonna be really good, and I just don't think Tennessee right now has the capability with Tannehill at the helm to really kind of ball out. And if this game, Tennessee does have a solid defense. Their pass rush is really good. Jeff Simmons. They do have guys like Kevin Byard in the secondary, who really good player, but I just think the Chargers, Herbert, Eckler, Keenan, all these guys, I think they're just too talented offensively, and I think they'll give. I just don't. Yeah, Ryan Tannehill. That's, I think, the two words to sum up why I'm going to pick the Chargers. So yeah. Raiders at Bills. Obviously, we haven't seen Buffalo play yet. Jimmy G squeaked out the win in Denver, so good on him. The only team in the AFC West to get a W. So Jimmy G, man, he just finds a freaking way to do it. Going to Buffalo, though, I'm not sure that suits Jimmy G and this Raiders team. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think I was pretty impressed by the Raiders, but no, I don't see it happening.
Yeah.
I'll talk a little bit just about how they looked. I liked, when he was out there, Jacoby Myers looked really good, and then he
Oh
got
my God.
hurt. And
That was bad.
that
I
was
thought it
pretty
was going to be
bad.
like another like
Yeah,
Damar Hamlin almost. Like
that,
when they panned to him, it was like he was like it literally
he,
looked like he was dead.
yeah, no, that was a scary moment. So prayers out to him. But Jimmy G looked in time with him and Adams, and I didn't see much of Renfro, but I'm sure they'll find a connection. And this passing offense looked competent, but yeah, I don't think they're going to beat the Bills, and their defense didn't look very good against the Broncos. So again, I don't see it looking very good against the Bills.
Yeah, it looks like, yeah, Hunter Renfro did not have a catch yesterday,
Oh,
which
really?
is interesting. I guess he's just kind of phased out of that offense. It's so
I
weird.
guess
He had that
so.
huge year, and then he's just kind
Yeah.
of falling off a cliff. Yeah, I'm gonna go with the Bills here too. Just at Buffalo. I mean, it's just first game of the year. I think, obviously if they win tonight, vibes are gonna be really high. Vibes will be high regardless. I mean, it's Buffalo Bills Mafia, but I think if they go into MetLife tonight and beat Aaron Rodgers and the Jets, that would be a heck of a way to start the season. But yeah, I'm gonna go them. I just think, Josh Allen at home, it's tough to beat, and this Raiders defense I don't think is very good at all. So yeah, I'm gonna go Bills. Moving on, Chiefs Jags. Chris Jones did sign today. Reworked his deal for this year, so he didn't get an extension, but he will be there, and most likely playing in this game, which is huge for that Chiefs defense. Calvin Ridley, huge week one. Big AFC game. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm really excited for this one. I'm pretty high on the Jaguars, especially their offense. I'm, kind of ready for them to arrive as one of those top groups in the NFL, but the Chiefs lost in week one, and they're not going to lose week two. So they're going to win almost no matter what. As long as Kelsey and Jones are healthy, I just don't see them losing, even though there's a Jags team that really could make noise in the playoffs. I just don't see the Chiefs losing 2 weeks in a row. So I'm gonna go with them.
I'm gonna go with the Jaguars. I
All
think
right.
it's tough betting on Mahomes, and tough betting against Mahomes. But I don't know, man. I think this Jaguars team, I think Calvin Ridley was really impressive, and I think the Chiefs secondary I'm just not sold on. I'm very worried, and I think this pass attack of the Jaguars is much better than the one of the Lions. The Lions, outside of Amon-Ra St. Brown, Sam Laporta I think was the next guy. Like they don't really have that great number two. Whereas the Jags, you got Calvin Ridley, Christian Kirk, Zay Jones, Evan Ingram, ETN out of the backfield. Like I think they're going to give Kansas City's defense a run for their money this early in the season too. I think later, as we've seen with these Kansas City defenses, it feels like Steve Spagnuolo kind of gets them going later on, and by the playoffs, they're really ready to play and they're a solid unit. But early on, they're still kind of gelling. They've got new pieces, obviously. So I'm going to go with the Jags. I think they're going to be able to squeak this one out. And then I think, next week is when this Chiefs team is just going to get on their roll. That sends them, to the playoffs. But we'll see. I mean, obviously, if Kelsey coming back is going to be huge. But receiver wise, I am still worried about the Chiefs. Like this team it's concerning. But I'm going to go with the Jags and an upset win over Kansas City, which even when I'm saying out of my mouth feels wrong. But moving on, Ravens, Bengals. Bengals really rough week one. You got to look at the conditions. Really wet, rainy game, but Joe Burrow threw for like 80 yards or something like that. I mean, really, really bad. T. Higgins didn't have a catch. Ravens on the flip side got the win, but Lamar didn't really look great. It wasn't a great game from them. Zay Flowers didn't look really good. What are your thoughts on this AFC North matchup?
Yeah, I'm just gonna touch on Zay Flowers really quickly. I think he was one of those guys where I just couldn't wait to see him play because, it's not often you don't really know who a guy is coming out, but when you're stuck in that Boston College passing attack and, he tested a little hurt at the combine, so I wasn't sure, quite if he had like that, he moves a little differently vertical juice, but he really seemed to have that yesterday. Although he didn't catch a bomb, but he just looked so athletic out there. And I think the Ravens, I mean, he might even be their one already. Obviously
Yeah.
you've got Andrews still probably the lead target, but he seemed like their clear first receiving option yesterday. I think this is going to be a really good game. I think the Bengals will bounce back. I keep talking about it with these 0-1 AFC contenders, but you cannot afford to lose this game, and especially in that AFC North. So I just think out of I think the Bengals do have a talent advantage over the Ravens, but I don't think it's, a huge one to the extent where you have to pick the Bengals. But I am going to pick the Bengals with a bigger sense of urgency and just, we've already seen the Ravens get banged up a little bit, which is not good. And we've seen that happen the last few years. You saw Dobbins down. Marcus Williams is like potentially out for the year. Stanley's week to week. Linderbaum's week to week. And I think they had even someone else who was hurt as well. So that's not good for the Ravens. And I'm just going to pick, and it was Marlon Humphrey, who is looking like he may play this week, but even him, he's up in the air. So that line could be hurt. That secondary could be weak. That's just not a good sign when you're going up against a team as good as the Bengals. So I'm going to take the Bengals here.
Yeah, I'm going to go Cincinnati too. I just think this offense is going to, assuming the conditions are good, I think they're going to go out and shine. We've seen Jamar Chase kind of dominate this Ravens secondary. And like you said, the Ravens are, pretty banged up already, which is never a good thing. But yeah, I think Joe Burrow is going to kind of come out and just do what, we're used to seeing Joe Burrow doing. So yeah, I'm going to, keep it short and sweet. I think the Bengals win this one. Moving on to the next game, Bears Bucks. I'm going to go with the Bucks again. I think Baker looked solid. He didn't look amazing, but he kind of, looked better than what we've seen recently, I feel like, from him. And I think this Buccaneers defense is still pretty good. You've still got guys like Vita Vea, Devin White, Levante David, Carlton Davis. And I think, honestly, it's just going to give Justin Fields some trouble. I don't think this Bears defense is really very good either. So I think the Bucks will be able to score. And I think, their defense will be able to give Justin Fields trouble. So I'm going to go with the Bucks. Starting out the season 2-0, so pretty good for Baker if that happens.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to go with the Bears here. I just don't trust Baker to do good weeks, like you just said.
Yeah.
I was a little bit unsure of it, but then as soon as you said Baker 2-0, I was like, I don't think this is gonna happen. But besides that, I'll get into the X's and O's a little bit here. I think this is gonna be interesting because the Bucks' strength on defense is their run defense, and the Bears' strength on offense, at least last year, was their running offense. So that should be an interesting matchup to kind of see who wins out there. I think, Fields will have a better week without having to worry about Jair Alexander or Rashawn Gary off the edge, or, quite the talent of the Packers defense. So I think it'll be a little bit better for the Bears on offense, and I think it'll be a little bit better for them on defense. Just again, I don't see Baker having another great week. I think, the Bears have some opportunistic players in the secondary between, Brisker and Eddie Johnson, no, Eddie
Eddie
Jackson.
Jackson.
Sorry. Yeah. And then the cornerback room, you have some young players there as well. So I think the Bears will win this one, but I could definitely see it going either way.
Yeah. Next two games, I think pretty clear cut here. 49ers at Rams. I'm going to go with the Niners. Really impressive week one. Defensively, they really gave Kenny Pickett trouble. And obviously, offensively, they're loaded. But Brock Purdy, super efficient. Brandon Ayuk had a huge game. I mean, if Brandon Ayuk kind of breaks out, he's been an underrated receiver. He had a really big year last year. But if Brandon Ayuk really breaks out, this 49ers team, man, they've got the ability to be really special if they stay healthy. Rams, really good week one. Puka Nacua, a guy who I made fun of last week on the podcast. He watched and was like, screw this kid. I'm going to ball out. And he did. He had a great week. So shout out to Puka Nacua. And the Rams, really, really good team. Or not really good team, but really good performance. But yeah, I don't think they're going to beat the 49ers. So I'm going to go Niners here. And, I think they'll win pretty comfortably.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to agree with that, but I will quickly apologize to the Rams. I didn't talk about it quite as much on the podcast, but I was almost thinking 0-17 for this team was possible because they just have, no names everywhere. And if this is, kind of a situation like the Dolphins a few years ago where they're just, playing really hard and you find a few guys that are actually good players like an Andrew Van Ginkel, like you talked
My
about.
boy.
But he was just, one of those guys, and you could see this start to happen with the Rams as well, where you just have guys show up because they're talented guys. Anyone who's in the NFL is going to be talented, at least at something, and they're going to be playing for their NFL career. So some breakout stars could happen, but the Niners just looked so good, and their defense is not going to be, Puka Nacua had a great week against the Seahawks defense, but I don't think it's going to be the same. I mean, he looked like a player for sure, but I don't think, I don't see 120 yards again for him. But, good for the Rams. And I think their outlook is definitely looking like they could be, maybe sneaky just if everyone stays healthy. Once they get Cup back, Donald stays healthy, Stafford stays healthy, they're well coached, and like I said, some of those breakout stars, or just solid players emerging. I think, this could be a, solid recipe for success, but not this week.
Yeah, definitely. Shout out Sean McVay. I mean, that guy, doesn't get the credit it deserves, he feel like sometimes. I mean, he's, I don't know. Just after last year, I feel like people kind of sleep on him a little bit, which is stupid because, he won the Super Bowl the year before for a reason.
Okay.
Oh, lights out.
Hold on. Okay.
Next game, I mean, I don't even think we have to spend any time on this. Giants at Cardinals. I'm going to go with the Giants. Cardinals, they put up some fight, but, Josh Dobbs, I don't really see anything, on that team's just boring. So I'm going to go with the Giants. They should, they're going to find a way to win 7 or 8 games most likely. So I'll go with Danny Dimes and the Giants here.
Yeah, same. Yeah, this is probably the most boring game we've talked about so far. I'm going to go with the Giants. Cardinals are fighting, but they don't have the talent, and the Giants are like a safe team, so I don't see them losing this game.
Yep. Next game, this is a fun one. Jets at Dallas. It's got to be the CBS game of the week. It's a really good game. Obviously, we haven't seen the Jets play, so it's a little tough to talk about this one. But I'm going to go with the Dallas Cowboys. I think the Jets pull it out tonight. And I just think going to Dallas, the way that defense plays, I just think it's going to be really tough. I think it's going to be a close game. I think the Jets will be in it, but I do think, in Dallas against this Dallas defense, which looks so good in week one, the pass rush, I think is going to give this Jets O-line trouble. The Jets O-line really is that kind of weakest spot of the roster right now. It's the biggest unknown in week 2. You're going against this Dallas pass rush. I mean, that is as scary as it could get. So I think Dallas's pass rush ultimately going to be too much for the Jets O-line to handle. And I think Dak Prescott will figure out a way to get it done. Obviously, this Jets defense and their pass rush also really good. So I think it's going to be, honestly, this could be a very low scoring game. I think both these defenses are up there, probably both top 5 units in the NFL, but I am going to go with Dallas. just because I think that pass rush, the Dallas O line, I have a bit more faith in than the Jets O line right now. So I'm going to go with Dallas next week.
Yeah, I think you can go either way here.
Yeah.
I think you're probably looking at, I would say, the two best defenses in the league. Just off the top of my head, I would say them and the Patriots, but I could be
Probably the Niners you got to throw in there
Niners,
too.
Niners. I knew I was forgetting
Yeah.
someone. But yeah, no, two of the top defenses in the league, no matter where you have them. But I think it's a bit tough because we haven't seen the Jets
Yeah.
play this week. So I'm gonna lean Cowboys, probably like one of those well played, low scoring, not too many drives games where both teams are executing really well, and it just makes me excited because I'm excited to watch this one. I'm excited for most of the matchups this week, but this may be my favorite one, and I'm gonna lean Cowboys here in a close one.
This next game is it's pretty boring. Commanders at Broncos. There's not really much there. I feel like that I'm invested in. I don't know. I'm gonna go with Denver here. I think the onside kick to start the game was pretty wild, and they were so close to having it too. They probably should have. They just touched it a second too early. But yeah, Washington. Honestly, I was a little disappointed in their performance. I thought this team would be able to really just wipe the floor with Arizona. They didn't really do that. Sam Howell. He showed his flashes, but yeah, I don't know. I think Denver is, I'm not super high on Denver, but at Denver, I feel like Sean Payton will get them, kind of on the right track this week and, get them a W. And, Russ, I think hopefully for his sake, will bounce back. I honestly didn't watch the Broncos game week 1, so I don't even know how he did, but I think he was just kind of like average. Like, I don't think he really did anything special, but yeah, I'll go with the Broncos at home against Washington.
Yeah, so I was a little disappointed by the Commanders too, especially in offense where they got sacked like 6 times, and I think they might have had like a pick six or a fumble six or something like that.
Yeah, there was something. Yeah. Yeah.
And it just not what you'd expect coming out against one of the worst teams in the league, or not what you'd want at least. So I'm gonna pick the Broncos here, even though they lost. I think they, are waiting on Jerry Jeudy to come back, and they kind of need a receiver because they kind of seem to be looking for guys to throw to. A lot of check downs, saw the little Jordan Humphrey get a touchdown. Kind of some random guys getting touches. So they're gonna be happy to get Jeudy back, even if he's not any sort of superstar. Just a developing good young receiver who can really help out Russ. Help this passing game, but I think this is pretty boring, low scoring game. I'll lean towards the Broncos though.
Yeah. Dolphins at New England Sunday Night Football, really good game. I'm gonna go with New England. I think in New England it's a tough environment. It's very different from LA where the Dolphins are coming from. So I think offensively, I think he's still gonna put up a solid game. It's just not gonna be what we saw against LA. I mean, that's foolish to think that. I don't think anyone's really thinking that they're going to go do that against this New England defense. Losing week 1, I just don't think a Bill Belichick coach team is going to come out flat. I think they're going to come out ready to play. I was really encouraged, like I already talked about, with Mac Jones's performance. So I think we see him kind of ball out. And obviously, this Dolphins defense, didn't play great against the Chargers. The Chargers, do have a better offense than New England, I think. But I think New England's going to be able to figure out a way to, score 24, 27, 30 points, something like that. And their defense, I think, is so good that, they'll be able to limit Tyreek Hill as much as possible where he doesn't, go for 200 yards on you. But yeah, I'm going to go with New England. Should be a really good game. It could get weird. I get kind of, some weird stuff could be happening, but, it's a big game for Tua. If Tua goes out there and throws for 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, like no picks, like then, he's in the MVP conversation. And then it's like, okay, Tua is for real. But this is a game that it could also be, 2-3 picks, and we're like, okay, there's the Tua that I feel like we think of at least.
Yeah, I'm gonna go Patriots here. It's always fun and a little bit random when you see, a top offense go up against a top defense, just because, you're used to a team like the Dolphins always getting 30 points a week, but what if they just don't? Or you're used to the Patriots always, stifling teams, but what if they just don't? So, that's going to be a very interesting matchup that probably determines the game here. But like you said, this Dolphins defense isn't super scary, especially without Ramsey. And I think, Xavier Howard's, getting up there in age. And I think the Patriots will be able to move the ball. They look very just competent on offense against the Eagles. And I think, like you said, getting that 24 to 30 point range, and hoping this defense can play well, it's going to be a good formula. And I just think they eke this one out in a close one.
Yep. Moving on to Monday night, where I guess there's two games. I guess that's a thing this year. There's I just looked it up. There's 3, I guess, weeks where there's 2 Monday night games. I don't know how I feel about that, to be honest. I don't know. I feel like the timing is not like 7:15 and 8:15 they're scheduled for, which I feel like is not, because it's like you watch the first game and then it's like, all right, I don't know, a little weird, but
weird format
alas,
for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, 2 Monday night games. Saints Panthers is the first one. It's an interesting game in Carolina. I'm gonna go with the Saints. I wasn't too encouraged by their performance, to be honest. I didn't think Derek Carr played very good at all. But I mean that's kind of, I guess, what you expect. Like, he's, new offense, whole new city. There's going to be some growing pains. I thought Chris Olave looked really good, which I think is huge for them. Michael Thomas was back, which was good to see. They had that guy Rashid Shaheen or something like that, I think. He kind of balled out, so he played good. Jamal Williams didn't look great, but I think they'll pull it out. I'm not too high on the Panthers personally. I mean, I feel like Bryce Young had a solid week 1. It wasn't, he was kind of just pretty efficient, honestly. I don't know. I'm not high on the Panthers, so I feel like the Saints will squeak it out, but this could be ugly, and Derek Carr could throw 3 picks. It's another one of those games where it's like, I don't know. Derek Carr did not look good at all, but I'll still pick the Saints here.
Yeah, I'm gonna pretty unconfidently go with the Panthers. They looked pretty weak at receiver, which isn't a surprise to me. And it's not, obviously that's going to be something they have to address in the future, but this isn't the year to win in Carolina, but it is a weakness. And, I feel bad for Bryce Young just because I think he's such a talented player, and I, don't want to see him have any year without any real receiving options. And they, they're already banged up with what little receiving options they do have. So I think it could be tough for them to move the ball, but Derek Carr didn't look great, and I'm not a huge believer in Carr. So I think this Panthers defense will be able to keep it pretty low scoring, and I think Bryce Young and this O-line will kind of steady the ship. But I don't think either of these teams are too good after week 1. I think the Panthers just asked too much of a rookie quarterback, and the Saints, I don't think are really inspiring on either side of the ball. So I think this is probably one of the weaker matchups of the week, but I'll go Panthers.
Yeah. The other Monday night game, last game of the slate for week 2, Browns at Steelers. That's a fun one. Cleveland really strong week 1 defensively, only holding the Bengals to 3 points. Offensively, not the best from Deshaun, but he managed to pull out the victory. Pittsburgh, on the other hand, looked horrific. Kenny Pickett, really bad performance, and just offensively did not get anything going. Deontay Johnson exited this game with an injury. I didn't really see anything about him today, so I'm not sure. They ruled him out pretty quickly, which probably isn't a good sign for his status this week. So if he's out, that receiver room starts to get pretty thin. What are your thoughts on this one? Should be a good, if the Browns win this one, that'd be a huge start, 2-0 against 2 AFC North opponents.
Yeah, everything is telling me to pick the Browns, but I think I'm going to go with the Steelers here. Like you talked about with Deontay, that's not good. I think Cam Hayward is going on IR. That's not good. They didn't look good on offense at all. They really couldn't move it against this Niners defense. But I think as good as the Browns defense looked, this is still a weaker unit than that Niners defense, which is just really scary to go against and even hard to move the ball against. And I think the Browns, their offense didn't look great. And, Watson's still a bit of a question mark. He kind of had a boneheaded play that, you're like, where is the old Watson? What happened? Yeah. Again, we can talk about the off the field and whatever, but just strictly on the field, it's really confusing and, is head scratching. Where did he go? But, I'm going to pick the Steelers. I think they give them some troubles here, even if they're a little banged up on defense. I think it's a tough night for Watson. I think they win it in a close one.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with the Cleveland Browns. I think defensively they really impressed. I think, Jim Schwartz's defense, you're already seeing it being implemented. I think, we talked about it when we broke down this team. This team is as talented as any team in the NFL. Defensively, you got guys like Myles Garrett. They added Zadarius Smith, Dalvin Tomlinson. Oh, I want to know his name. The D tackle came from Houston. I'm gonna
Oh,
botch it. Oh,
Agbanya Okoronkwo.
yeah, that sounds about right to me. He's good. Obviously the secondary, Denzel Ward, obviously one of the better corners in the NFL. Grant Delpit made some plays yesterday against T. Higgins. He was pretty impressive. So, I think this Cleveland defense is gonna be really good. And offensively, they ran their offense through Nick Chubb as they should. He had a really good game. And I think, look at the weather conditions for this one. I don't think it's fair to assess either quarterback season. Obviously, Joe Burrow threw for like 80 yards. So
True.
we know that's not what Joe Burrow is capable of. So we'll see. I think this week will be, it's a tough defense, but if Deshaun, hopefully the weather's better and we're able to get a better look at, kind of where Deshaun Watson's at today versus, last year and how that compares obviously to his days in Houston.
Right.
But I still think he had his flashes. I mean, the one rushing touchdown I thought was pretty good, and he
Yep.
made some throws. So, look, Deshaun, I kind of mentioned it last week. I don't think he's going to get to that Houston level again. But can he be a good enough quarterback to lead this team to the playoffs? I mean, the jury's still out, but that Browns defense looks damn good, and I think they'll be able to. They did it in the playoffs 2-3 years ago. They went into Pittsburgh, beat the Steelers, so I think they'll be able to do it again on prime time on ABC, 8:15 p.m. kickoff. So that does it for week 2 of the NFL. Real quick before we end the episode, I want to talk about the biggest game in college football this week. Otherwise, the slate was pretty, no real big upsets. I feel like nothing really big happened. But Texas at Alabama, huge game. And Texas really showed up 34-24. They beat Alabama. Quinn Ewers, 349 yards passing, 3 touchdowns. I mean, we heard about this kid as a prospect, one of the highest ranked prospects of all time. It finally looks like he's living up to that hype.
Yeah. There's a lot to talk about here. I think the Milrow for Alabama, that was you don't want to really harp on a kid, but he didn't look ready out there. Again, he's a young guy with a lot of potential, so I'm sure he'll figure it out. But just, right now didn't look like he was ready to win a huge game like that. And like you said, this is kind of Ewers' coming out party. There were some drops early, but we saw this really talented receiving core and him kind of figure it out as the game went along, even against this talented Bama defense. And I think, the big takeaway from here is, what's Ewers looking like and what is this QB class looking like is really my question. As I'm getting excited because we've obviously heard a lot about Caleb Williams. We've heard a lot about Drake May, and now we have 2 guys in Quinn Ewers and Shadur Sanders who are really breaking out and are both eligible for this year. So I'm really excited to see how that plays out just as a quick overview, but I think that was a good game as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Texas, like you said, they just found a way to win. Quinn Ewers, obviously super talented. Receiver wise, they got guys that make plays, Worthy, Mitchell, Jashavion Sanders, those guys all balled out. I'll be honest, I'm kind of a college football casual, so I don't know too much about these guys. But they looked really good, and Quinn Ewers looked really good. So Texas, obviously, they're not in the SEC yet. So schedule wise, I mean, I'll take a quick look. Wyoming, Baylor, Kansas, Oklahoma, TCU. This schedule is honestly pretty easy. This team should, in the Big 12, honestly, they should. This was the big challenge right away, and they passed it with flying colors. So this is a team that probably should make the college football playoff if things go right. Obviously, it's college football; anything can happen. But they're in a really good position right now. On the flip side with Bama, like you mentioned, Jalen Milrow, just the 2 picks. It's just tough. I think this Bama team is in a spot right now where they're just the talent is just not there compared to past years. I think you look at and maybe I'm a casual and don't know some of these guys, and that's on me. But you look at the offenses these guys have had from having Hurts, Tua, Mac Jones, Bryce Young be your quarterbacks, and all those receivers. I mean, Jalen Waddle, Devonta Smith, Ruggs was there. Obviously, he was a first round pick. Jerry Jeudy. There's definitely guys I'm forgetting. John Mechie was a beast. I mean, like all these names. Jameson Williams, obviously too. And right now it just doesn't feel like they have that star power on offense. Even at running back, I mean, none of those guys averaged over 4 yards a carry in the game. It just doesn't feel like they have the talent offensively to be, the Alabama that we're used to. And not, Alabama struggled last year too. They missed the college football playoff. So they're kind of just in a rough spot. Not in a rough spot program wise, because obviously this team still has 5 stars coming in and out, 24/7. But they're just kind of at a spot where they need some of these guys to develop and, kind of turn into those stars. And it doesn't feel like they kind of have that young offensive core right now, at least, that can do that. It's going to be another year or so. The program, obviously, I think if we talk about Clemson, that's a program that maybe you look at and say, well, shoot, that could be headed for a downward spiral. But Alabama is Alabama. They're always going to be elite. They're always going to be getting the top recruits. But right now, it's just, the talent has not translated to the field. And will it? It's tough to say. Obviously, playing in the SEC is tough. I would expect this team to lose at least once or twice more throughout the rest of the season, if I had to say.
Yeah, if I can just add on to that really quickly, I think we saw this team kind of get carried by Bryce Young last year. We saw it in the Texas game where like he didn't really have anyone to throw to but Jahmyr Gibbs sometimes, and that certainly was a problem as well, along with the quarterback issue. So, whether it's a down year or a down couple years, or, like you said, it doesn't seem very likely, but in theory, it could happen where the program, kind of takes a turn for the worse. But just probably, a 3-loss or 4-loss team here for a year or two. And then they probably figure it out once they get, more future first round picks in the building. But not, certainly disaster mode for some Alabama fans who've never, seen a team like this, that maybe isn't going to be contending for the national championship, but, probably not panic mode from a overhaul, long-term perspective.
For sure. And with that, that will do it for this week's episode of Outside the Arena. Make sure if you haven't already, like, comment, and subscribe. Follow us on our social medias. That will all be linked in the description. Week 2, see how it goes, and we'll see you next week on Outside the Arena.